The fluorescent lights of Mel's diner cast harsh shadows across Emma's tired face as she wiped down the same table for the third time, her hands trembling slightly. At 19, she carried herself with the weight of someone much older, her shoulders hunched forward as if bracing against an invisible storm. When the bell above the door chimed, announcing another customer, she didn't look up immediately. She'd learned that sometimes it was better not to know who was walking in. Marcus Thompson pushed through the glass door with his 5-year-old daughter Lily bouncing beside him, her pigtails swaying with each excited step. The weekend custody visits always included their special Saturday morning breakfast tradition, and Mel's Diner had become their sanctuary, a place where pancakes came shaped like Mickey Mouse and the coffee was strong enough to help a single father navigate the complexities of part-time parenting. "Daddy, can we sit by the window?" Lily's voice carried across the nearly empty restaurant, her small hand tugging at Marcus's jacket sleeve. He was about to nod when he noticed something that made him pause. The young waitress behind the counter had visibly stiffened at the sound of heavy footsteps emerging from the kitchen. Emma's breath caught in her throat as Frank Morrison, the diner's owner and her boss, appeared with that familiar scowl etched across his weathered face. At 52, Frank ruled his small kingdom with an iron fist wrapped in grease-stained aprons and constant criticism. Emma quickly grabbed her order pad and moved toward the new customers, but not before Marcus caught the flash of something that looked disturbingly like fear in her eyes. "Table for two?" Emma's voice was professionally cheerful, but Marcus noticed how she positioned herself so she could keep Frank in her peripheral vision. Something about her forced smile reminded him of his own childhood and the way he'd learned to make himself invisible when his father's temper flared after too many beers. As they settled into their booth, Lily immediately began chattering about her week with her mother, but Marcus found his attention drawn to the subtle drama unfolding across the restaurant. Every time Frank emerged from the kitchen, Emma would tense up, her movements becoming more hurried, more anxious. When she accidentally dropped a spoon while serving another table, Frank's voice boomed across the restaurant. "Ma, can't you do anything right? That's coming out of your pay." The harshness in Frank's tone made several customers look up from their meals, but Emma just nodded silently, her cheeks flushing crimson as she bent to retrieve the fallen utensil. Marcus watched as she blinked rapidly, clearly fighting back tears, and something deep in his chest tightened with recognition. "Daddy, why does that man sound so mean?" Lily whispered, her innocent question cutting through the uncomfortable silence that had settled over their table. Marcus had spent 3 years as a social worker before switching to marketing, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Throughout their meal, he observed the pattern: Frank would appear, Emma would shrink, and the young woman would become increasingly agitated with each interaction. When Frank began berating her for taking too long with an order, actually raising his hand as if to strike her before seemingly remembering they had customers, Marcus knew he couldn't stay silent. But it was what happened next that truly broke his heart. Ma, clearly overwhelmed in fighting panic, dropped a full tray of dishes. The crash echoed through the diner like a gunshot, and Frank's face turned purple with rage. "You worthless piece of Frank started, advancing on Emma with his fist raised, but Marcus was already on his feet. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carrying the calm authority he'd perfected during years of diffusing tense situations. "I couldn't help but notice you have quite the establishment here." He pulled out his phone, making sure Frank could see him opening his camera app. "My daughter and I were just discussing how memorable our experience has been. I run a pretty popular social media consulting business, and I always love sharing authentic local experiences with my followers." Frank's hand slowly lowered as he processed the implied threat. In today's world, one viral video could destroy a small business overnight, and Marcus was counting on Frank's self-preservation instincts to kick in. "The service has been absolutely exceptional," Marcus continued, his phone now obviously recording. "Emma here has been the most professional, courteous waitress we've encountered in years, haven't you, sweetheart?" He looked directly at Emma, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. Frank forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Of course, Emma's one of our best." "I'm sure she is," Marcus replied, never taking his eyes off Frank. "And I'm certain you treat all your employees with the respect and kindness they deserve." especially someone as hardworking as Emma appears to be. The message was clear, and Frank, despite his brutish behavior, wasn't completely stupid. He mumbled something about getting back to the kitchen and disappeared, leaving Emma standing there with tears streaming down her face. Marcus approached her carefully, the way he might approach a frightened animal. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, but her hands were shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have Towa." "Yes, I did," Marcus interrupted gently. "Everyone deserves to work in a place where they feel safe." What Marcus discovered next changed everything. Through quiet conversation, he learned that Emma was working double shifts to support her sick grandmother, that Frank had been escalating his verbal abuse for months, and that she was too afraid to quit because jobs were scarce in their small town. She'd been trapped by circumstances, enduring treatment that no one should have to face. That's when Marcus made a decision that would surprise even himself. He asked Emma for her phone number, and not for romantic reasons, but because he wanted to help. Within a week, he'd connected her with 3 different restaurants in the city where he lived, all of whom were impressed by the glowing recommendations he provided. He also helped her understand her legal rights and connected her with resources for reporting workplace harassment. But the story didn't end there. Marcus's social media post about their experience at Mel's Diner, carefully crafted to highlight the importance of treating service workers with dignity, went viral. The community rallied around Emma, offering support and job opportunities. Frank, facing a social media backlash and several formal complaints, was forced to examine his behavior and eventually sell the restaurant to someone who understood that kindness and respect weren't just good business, they were basic human decency. 3 months later, Emma sent Marcus a photo from her new job at an upscale bistro downtown. She was smiling genuinely for the first time since he'd met her, wearing a crisp uniform and standing confidently beside her new co-workers. The accompanying text simply read, "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." That night, as Marcus tucked Lily into bed, she asked him about their adventure at the diner. "Daddy, why did you help that sad lady?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "Because sometimes, princess, the smallest act of courage can change someone's entire world. And when we have the power to help someone, we should always choose kindness. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they're just single fathers having breakfast with their daughters, choosing to speak up when silence would be easier." In a world that often feels divided, Marcus's story reminds us that compassion is contagious, courage is accessible to everyone, and one person's willingness to stand up for another can create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond a small-town diner on a Saturday morning.